Is it time to sell Palantir stock? Today we're going to ask that very question. And this video is not an offer to buy or sell Palantir stock, but we're going to look at the technicals today and try to figure out where Palantir stock is going next. And I'm also going to explain some very important things going on with this stock right now. So just as a very quick disclaimer, let's get this out of the way right now up front. Is I am not a bear. A lot of people will have selective hearing when listening to this video, and they will just assume I'm a perma bear that does not like their stock, which they are currently very bullish on. And that is not the point of this video at all. If you are a Palantir bull, I have nothing against your stock. All I am trying to do here is give you a warning. And this stock got on my radar after it gapped up after earnings, and all I have seen is people talking about buying this stock, and I've still yet to see anybody give a good reason you should probably be selling this stock. So today I want to give you a different perspective on this stock, and I want to show you why bulls may be selling it, and then once the bulls start to take their profits, why the bears may actually start to short it, and that is the perspective I want to focus on today. So like I said earlier, this stock got on my radar after earnings when it gapped up, and anytime a stock gaps up after earnings, it could be two kinds of gaps. The first gap is called a breakaway gap, and this is extremely bullish, and this means that something fundamentally has changed in the stock, and they have absolutely crushed earnings and started to raise guidance. And because this is such a drastic fundamental change in the company, this gap is very unlikely ever going to fill, and the stock is going to be what's called gap and go, where it just gaps up and never looks back and starts to run. And the best example that I'm going to give for you today of a breakaway gap will be NVIDIA stock, because it is a perfect example of a breakaway gap. And a lot of bears got this wrong in the last 2 years when NVIDIA was on that very powerful bull run. There were lots of bears telling you to sell NVIDIA stock and that these gaps were going to fill. And if you remember back, and I made an exact opposite video of that where I said you should not short NVIDIA stock. And I gave a very long list of reasons why those were breakaway gaps. And as you will see in history, they stayed breakaway gaps, and they will very likely never fill unless something very fundamentally wrong happens to NVIDIA stock, which will be known through its financial reports. Now, the second kind of gap that you can get is called an exhaustion gap, and these gaps absolutely fill. And what happens during an exhaustion gap is that there was just way too many bulls in a stock. Some bears got attracted to that stock for some reason because they thought there was too much retail greed and it was overvalued. And I'm sure you've seen this many times where people start bringing valuations into the reason why they're shorting a bull trend. Even though I always teach you never try to call tops and never try to short a bull trend. But bears do it anyway, and during an exhaustion gap, it is just every single bear throwing in the towel. The buyers are getting harder and harder to come by because at this point in an exhaustion gap, everybody that wanted to buy the stock has already bought the stock. So you're getting reduced volumes on buying, and the majority of the volume is simply just bears getting short squeezed. And a short squeeze means they're covering their short positions, and you cover a short position by buying the stock back, and then you realize your loss when you do that. So today's focus will be on explaining why Palantir is more than likely an exhaustion gap, which means this gap after earnings is going to have a higher probability to fill. And I am going to make the case to you why it is unlikely a breakaway gap where those gaps do not fill. And I'm going to use the example of NVIDIA. So it's important to understand right out of the gate the differences between these gaps, because this is going to be important to understanding why people are likely going to start selling Palantir stock. And that is going to be the basis of this analysis. So as promised, we will flip over to NVIDIA stock, and all I need to do here is go back in time to when NVIDIA started to absolutely crush earnings. And this was going back to their earnings report of May 2023, so roughly 2 years ago. NVIDIA back then was only trading at $30 a share, and of course there's been stock splits, so it was actually a different value then, but that would have been the market value with the current stock split. And after earnings, NVIDIA absolutely crushed their earnings report right here, beating revenue expectations by 10%, which is a double-digit beat, which is very difficult for a company to do. But more importantly, what I want you to focus on is not just the fact that they beat their earnings report, because the stock market only ever prices in future performance, and an earnings report by definition is what happened in the past. So what is more important than anything when looking at a stock's performance, especially when you have a breakaway gap, is their revenue guidance for the following quarter. So right here, you can see they were estimating $6.53 billion for this quarter, and when they reported, they told the shareholders we actually made 7.19 billion, which was that 10% beat. And on top of that, the company became more profitable because they were able to report a better earnings per share than expected by over 18%. So this is what is called absolutely crushing your earnings when you are getting double-digit beats on both revenue and profit. But more importantly, this is where investors' minds were blown, is that NVIDIA's revenue projection for this quarter was 6.53 billion, and their forward guidance for the next earnings report for the following quarter went all the way up to 11.19 billion, and their earnings per share were also projected to be more profitable. And then when they reported that earnings report, they beat that raised guidance by damn near double, an additional 20%. So they did double their revenue. And this was all within one quarter. And on top of that, they became 29% more profitable. So this is why I was warning people, do not short NVIDIA stock. And that video is still up on the internet if you want to go see what I said back then. And many bears ignored it and continued to short this stock anyway. And then, as we know in history, the rest is history, and this stock just ran away. And that gap is a blip on the radar that will never fill unless something very fundamentally wrong happens to NVIDIA stock. So I know we spent a lot of time talking about NVIDIA, but that is where you need to understand the difference, because when we go back to Palantir, the first thing you need to understand with a breakaway gap is, did they beat their earnings? And we could see right here, they did beat their earnings by 6.67%, which is very good. I would call that crushing earnings, especially because they did become more profitable. But the difference here is not only did they not get a double-digit beat, but they reported revenues of 827 million. And again, that is all in the past. We need to go look at what they're giving for forward guidance for their next earnings. And their next earnings estimate for revenue is only 863 million, which in my opinion is not nearly as impressive as NVIDIA doubling their revenue and raising their guidance with confidence. Whereas here we're seeing Palantir saying, yes, we made 827. We're projecting we're going to grow to 863. And in my opinion, that does not warrant this large gap up after earnings. And I do not want to spend too much time talking about valuations today, but by far everybody can agree that this stock is way too overvalued if their earnings are only growing at that small margin. So in my opinion, that alone tells us this is more than likely going to be an exhaustion gap. And the best way to explain that is to go back in time on Palantir stock. When it initially IPO'd, you could see the chart looked extremely similar, where it was very bullish. From the IPO price to where it all-time high back then was over a 382% gain in just a matter of months. This only took about 4 months to reach all-time highs of over 382%. So very similar to the recent growth we're seeing now. And just like right now, back then, nobody was saying to sell this stock, and a lot of shorts were getting squeezed out of it. And eventually you can see from here that the stock did start to turn around and did start to sell. And from that all-time high to the previous all-time high breakout was a 35% decline. And the whole time this stock was declining, people were buying the dip because they were saying how bullish this stock was, how amazing they were, how great their AI technology was, and how they were a proprietary company. And they were thinking a 35% drop was an absolute steal. And then from there, we continued to drop an additional 27%. And even if you thought that was a good deal from all-time highs, that was a drop of over 52%. So that stock is extremely on sale now, right? Because you're getting it down 52% from the all-time high. It is an absolute steal of a deal. So anybody that was buying down here at $21 thought they were getting a great deal. The stock continued to drop from there, an additional 20% from the steal of a deal. So let's just say you got that price and you said, okay, I just caught the bottom. I just bought this stock at $17. I am never going to sell this stock. It is going right back up to $43. And from $17, that means I'm going to make over 160% and I'm going to be rich. And then, of course, the stock starts to run and you're getting all excited and you cannot wait for it to go back into the 40s. It reaches $29 and then starts to absolutely tank. And even if you bought it from the very low entry of only $17, you still had an additional drop of 62% when it went all the way down to $6. Now, let's say you're one of those unfortunate people who thought $21 was a steal of a deal. Now you are down 69%, and if you bought anywhere near 29, you would have been down 77%. So the main reason I'm trying to show you this is because back then Palantir had the same exact story it has now. Everybody was extremely bullish on their AI technology and their software that they offered. And just like today, many people buying this stock are simply chasing it because it's performing well and it's instantly rewarding them. But that does not guarantee it'll last. And we can see right here, back then Palantir was making about $446 million in revenue. So without a doubt, they have grown since then. But what you need to understand is that they are not growing like NVIDIA, and this is unlikely going to be a breakaway gap. So with that out of the way, we can now start talking about present day. And from present day back down to a retest of the breakout, Palantir stock could easily drop 30% from here. And as I just showed you by looking at historical price, that may just be the beginning of it. So what I want you to take away from this is that if you own this stock, you need to understand it is not guaranteed, but it is likely this stock could easily drop 30% or more from this price. And if that does not bother you, then you can click off of this video right now. And if you're comfortable going through a 30 to 50 or even 60 to 70% drawdown from here, then there's nothing left that I can tell you to change your mind because you've already made up your mind. But if you are a short-term minded trader and you are aware of this situation where if you have $1 million in this stock and it drops 30%, you are about to lose 300 grand on your account. And I know I am not okay with that, which is exactly why I'm looking at this stock even as a possibility to short sell it. So the first thing we need to look at when we look at Palantir is, as I said earlier, this is more than likely an exhaustion gap where there was just too many bears shorting this stock while there was tons of retailers and even possibly smart money piling into it. And that caused this huge exhaustion of a short squeeze after earnings. And now it's getting to the point where there's really nobody left to buy it and all of the bears have already given up. And it is then when a stock typically really starts to see the selling. But even then, it could still take a few months. So what I want to do is I want to draw you a path of what could happen. And just for argument's sake, we have no idea where this stock is going in the future. And I'm not pretending to know where this stock is going in the future, but I do know how to follow price action and I do know how to identify when a stock is topping. So what I want to show right now is I want to show how I would look for evidence to sell this stock or even short sell this stock. And for argument's sake, let's just say it does go a little bit higher. Eventually, if this stock is going to do what I think, we will see a very sharp sell-off. There will immediately be profit taking from anybody who was able to short the top or bulls that are now panicking. Dip buyers will say we are coming into support right around $100 and they will buy it back up. And at this point, people will say, we just caught the bottom. This stock is going back to all-time highs. And they will get very euphoric yet again. And that is when this stock will really start to tank. And that is when we are very likely coming down into the 80s. So the first thing you need to understand is this is a 100% theoretical scenario. I am not telling you this is going to happen because I have no way to know if this is going to happen. But I can tell you, as I am seeing this price action, there are things that will trigger in the price that will allow us to trade it. And that is what I want to teach you today on how you can follow price action, how you can know when to take profits on your runners, and how you can even know when to successfully short a stock as it's starting to roll over and getting ready to die. All right, so if you're looking to sell this stock or you want to short this stock, my opinion of the best way to do that is simply wait for this chart to play out and wait for proof that we are getting sellers and that something is fundamentally shifting in the price action where we're going from a very nice and strong bull trend to some sort of high volume red candles to show us there are some big money movers getting out of the stock. And that is going to reveal itself right here on the price action, which you can clearly see in examples like this, where you start to get those large red body candles. You're going from higher lows and higher highs to now a lower high and what is a lower low breakdown. And this is how technical analysis and following price action is 100% objective and it doesn't require any guessing. Is you can clearly see how this trend was going from higher lows and higher highs into a lower high and a lower low rejection. And while that doesn't guarantee it has to go down forever, it is definitely an opportunity to make some money to the downside as you get a continuation of that move and that breakdown. Now, with my example of what I am showing you, there is a good example. This is going to be a 30% drop or even more if we go to an even higher price and then start to drop. And this to me makes it worth trading because if I can even catch a part of this move, let's say I only get half of it and I get a 15% move to the downside, that is a very favorable risk reward where I can risk something like maybe only 5% to make 15%. And now I have a 3-to-1 risk reward ratio. So that's what I want to focus on teaching you today. And this is going to be as simple as just letting this chart play out. We don't need to make any assumptions about where this stock will top. We can let it go higher. The higher it goes, the better, higher because that means it's going to come down even more when the time comes. So we don't need to have any impatience. We don't need to say, hey, I just watched this video, I'm going to go sell Palantir stock on Tuesday. But you should at least have it in the back of your mind that this is a very valid scenario that could be coming up. So you can either start to set up a bearish trade plan or a profit taking plan if you're a bull. If you start to see something like this playing out, and what you will see is you will see a sharp rejection. That rejection should be on high volume with large red bodied candles like we saw back here. That bounce that we get once the buyers of the dip show up should result in a lower high rejection. And the best way to know you're getting a lower high rejection is simply wait for proof from a lower high that you're getting more high volume selling in large red bodied candles. And then what will happen is eventually price cannot lie. And if we are going lower, we are going to have to get a lower low breakdown, which is going to look like a break below this previous low. You will see that in the price action, and sometimes you even get a retest of it before you kiss it goodbye and go back down towards the previous breakout. So I'm not telling you this is exactly how it's going to play out. You have to understand you need to watch the chart and physically see what it is doing and have a plan around following price. But this is largely what you are going to see and what you have even seen in the past. And we can measure this previous decline was 23%. So you can see this stock has had such volatile pullbacks in the past. And most people would say anything more than a 20% decline is a bear market. But obviously with a stock that's running this much, 23% looks like a pullback on the chart. So don't think this is any small fries. If we get a pullback from here, this is easily 30% or more. And then there's still the opportunity that even if we do bounce from this support, we could still put in another lower high and continue even lower towards $58. And from a previous all-time high, that could be a drop of over 50%. So this is possible. I am not telling you it will happen, but as you are following price, if you just continue to see lower highs and lower lows, which you will see evident from the price breaking down below previous structure with the lower high rejections, this is screaming in your face that what happened to Palantir in the past is going to happen again. And if you ignore it, you will be very surprised when you look in the rearview mirror and say, wow, I really knew there was just way too much bullish sentiment back here and the earnings were not justifying it. The valuation was not justifying it. And I knew there was a very good chance this was an exhaustion gap that was going to fill, which is screaming in your face that you have a lot of risk to the downside if that exhaustion gap is a 30% decline before it even fills. So this video is more focused on helping you understand when you should try to short a bullish stock. If you're going to do it, don't just go blindly short this stock because it's overvalued. That does not work. This stock can remain overvalued and the valuation could catch up to it as it has future growth. You need to wait for price action on the chart to show you proof that the sellers are there and the breakdown and the rollover and dying effect is happening. And that is why you really should wait for proof of sellers, proof of lower high rejections, and proof of lower low breakdowns before you start to get bearish on this stock. While I do believe the bearish sentiment is coming very soon and I do believe this stock will go lower, that does not mean that it has to happen. I am going to personally be looking to short this stock on weakness once the price action and the chart allow it. And I am definitely not buying this stock at this price and this valuation because the risk and the reward just isn't there, that even if it does go higher, in my opinion, the downside risk far outweighs the upside reward. So this is the viewpoint I wanted to bring to you today about Palantir stock. I just see way too many people that are still saying to buy it, and I simply just don't see it. I don't understand it, and I think this is more than likely what is going to play out. And I do believe we will see the sentiment shifting rapidly because nothing changes sentiment faster than price. Right now, everybody is bullish because the price is going higher, and you will be surprised how fast everybody gets bearish once the price starts going lower. And that is why I tell you that nothing changes sentiment faster than price. And you always have to trade the chart. You cannot just go blindly short this thing because you think it's overvalued. So that's my take. I'm going to leave it right there, and we'll probably follow up with this video in the future. And I do think we'll have a very good chance to see that this has largely played out.